Hello, Andrew.
Hello, Helen. Hello, good afternoon.
Hello, everyone. If you're watching this is just a little chat today, and that's all the Lent course really is—a little chat, really, between people. And we're talking about today justice. This is the first session of our Lent course, and it's based on the material that the Church of England have brought out called "Embracing Justice." And this first week, we're talking about liberation. And the session, unlike the other sessions, this session is totally based on a particular book of the Bible, which is the book of Exodus. Now, lots of people only really know Exodus from their childhood stories, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we just thought we'd have a very quick run through on the story of Exodus. What do you think of, Andrew, when you think of the book of Exodus?
Yeah, very good thing you said there. I immediately think of Moses because it starts off, doesn't it, with Moses in the burning bush. Well, first of all, the birth of Moses in hidden in the River Nile with his sister watching on, and Pharaoh's daughter coming to rescue him and to take him on board and bring him up. And
Yeah.
then I think of Moses and all those Moses stories when he went off and murdered an Egyptian, wasn't it? I think, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, Egyptian soldier. Yeah,
Yes, yeah.
yeah. But
And
it's very interesting the the Book of Moses talks about the Hebrews in Egypt, and of course the Hebrews arrived in Egypt because Joseph went there, and then
yes.
his brothers followed because there was a famine.
Mm,
And they stayed, and all the Hebrews from that, were the descendants of those 12 brothers and their servants and hangers on, if you like, until they became this huge nation. And of course, at the point where when Moses was born, there were far too many of them for the Egyptians' liking. And there's a quote actually in the material for today that if you download the material and have a look at it, you'll be able to, or print it off, you'll be able to read. But the quote is from Exodus chapter 1, verses 8 to 11, that says, "Now a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. He said to his people, 'Look, the Israelite people are more numerous and more powerful than we. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, or they will increase, and in the event of war, join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land.' Therefore they set taskmasters over them to oppress them with forced labour." So it's very, the situation just completely changed around in those, goodness knows how many years it was, several hundred, I guess, but but not long really.
yeah,
And of course the Israelites became oppressed.
yeah, yeah.
Enter Moses, really, because the Pharaoh was trying to kill off the baby boys, wasn't he? Isn't
He,
that why Moses went in?
yes, it was, yeah, because that's why Moses was hidden in the first
Yeah,
place. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. And Moses is a very interesting character because he is Hebrew by birth, but very much brought up as an Egyptian. I can
yeah,
imagine him being brought up in the Egyptian court,
yeah.
as an 8, 9, 10 year old boy. And then I'm just wondering to myself, at what age did he discover actually he was not Egyptian? He's actually
Yeah,
the oppressed people. I've often thought that, I
I
wonder
don't
what age he
know.
was and what his reaction was when he found out as well.
Well, I think he must have had a knowledge, don't you think? Because he hit the Egyptian or killed the Egyptian soldier because the soldier was abusing his fellow Hebrews.
Yeah,
So,
but
so
that
it must. Oh, I see what you mean. At what
yeah,
point
that
did
would have
he?
been
Yeah,
later. I mean, could have been
yeah,
in his late teens, probably in his late teens actually, because that's when you're starting to find out about things and you sort of take action perhaps yourself sometimes.
yeah.
Going back to my own teenage days.
But of course, God, Moses ran away, didn't he? Because he was afraid of
Yes,
any reprisal from that, and
that's yeah,
and uh, and then God brought him back
yes,
because he spoke to
yes.
him directly from a burning bush that didn't burn.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
And Moses went back and pleaded with Pharaoh to let his people go, and Pharaoh wouldn't, and so God sent, how many was it? How many plagues?
All those
Ten.
plagues, isn't it?
Ten plagues.
Well, it varies because one of the Psalms, somewhere around 100 and something or other, itemises all these plagues, and I think there's a slight difference in
Oh,
the.
really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
just I only found that out the other week, and I was doing a commentary reading on the Psalms
Yeah.
concerned, and so yeah, it doesn't quite parallel, but clearly there was a tradition there that all these
Yeah.
plagues happened.
But then it's an oral tradition, isn't it?
It
Handed
is,
down at this
yeah,
point rather
yeah,
than written.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it got progressively worse, and of course the final plague was the passing over of the angel of death,
Yeah.
and all the sons of the Egyptians were killed,
Yeah.
and blood was marked on the door to save the Hebrews,
The
firstborn sons
Passover. Yeah.
of Passover, yeah. From which,
Mm.
of course, we get the great Christian tradition that's celebrated in Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And of course, after that, the Pharaoh did let them go, but only momentarily, and then
yes,
started chasing after them till they got to
right,
the Red Sea.
yes,
And God allowed Moses to lift his staff and part the Red Sea, and the Israelites went over safely. And when the Egyptians tried to follow them, the sea came back over them, and
that's it.
they all did die.
As it
Yeah,
said, their chariot wheels got clogged in the sea or the riverbed. Yeah,
yeah.
yes,
And then, of course, the Hebrews were left to wander in the desert without anywhere to go, really,
yes,
for a while.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
but God kept them wandering in the desert because they'd been a bit naughty. But that's another story
yes.
altogether.
And of
So,
course,
yeah, go on.
I was
Sorry.
going to say, of course, then that time was when the Hebrew people transferred from being a nation, a collection of slaves,
Uh,
to becoming an organised group of people. The foundations of being a nation, actually, a proper
yeah,
nation.
yeah,
The formation period, I want to say.
yeah. And we're looking at the first 16 verses here, but obviously in verse 20, there is the Ten Commandments because they
Yes,
needed laws in order to stop
absolutely.
killing each other and
That's it.
yeah, and make sure that everyone was fed. Yeah.
Yes,
So
yes.
so that's just a brief chat about, the first 16 verses of Exodus. So we
Hmm.
come on to the meat of our session this week, which is about liberation.
Yeah.
And there's some statements and questions on the material. So the first statement is originally Pharaoh invited the Israelites to be in Egypt, but then they became strangers and they were seen as a threat. It became about us and them rather than friends and neighbours. They became the other, the ones to blame, the ones to fear. They were no longer equals. As a result, the Israelites became enslaved, mistreated, and eventually exterminated. So the questions about that are: how does injustice start, by thoughts or actions, and who do we speak about as the other? It's actually a pattern that you see time and time again, isn't it? I think,
Absolutely.
any civil war is kind of based on
Mm,
this sort of premise, isn't it?
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
That
And I think,
one side thinking that they're have more right to life than the other side, really, or more
yes,
right to power.
yeah, yeah. And it very often comes from a feeling of threat, doesn't it? From the other side. The other side's got stronger. As it happened in Egypt there with Moses, there was a threat. Those people there were going to be bigger and bigger and take over. So it all seems to start with thoughts, I think, actually. Yeah, yeah, of
I
fear.
mean, it's certainly the situation in Ukraine,
Yes.
and that someone has thought that somehow or other this country or various countries are posing a threat, and that the
Absolutely.
only way to deal with them is to attack them with it seems no thought about what the aftermath of that might be in terms of the liberation of those people in Ukraine.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
it's desperate,
It
really.
really is.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah. And
yeah,
sadly, well, again, it's playing this out, isn't it? Because the threat has now developed into a flight. As we're seeing at the moment, all these thousands of
a million people,
Ukrainian
isn't it? Or
citizens
virtually,
literally
yeah,
fleeing
yeah,
west, into Poland
yeah,
and neighbouring countries. It's the same pattern happening again.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. We
It
never.
says it says here the Israelites cried out in pain, but they did not argue, demand, or reason. God remembered his covenant to help his people and was moved to action. Oppression and injustice are hard realities for people today. They seriously are.
Yes,
And the questions are: do we have a covenant, and for whom? So, who is it that we would want to protect? And when we are moved, when are we moved to action through compassion? And when have we just been a bystander? Oh, I think I'm a bystander all the time, actually,
I
out
know.
of fear. It's awful.
Yes. Yeah. I know.
I'd like to think that we really do stand up for injustice, but we always do it. We always think, what is the cost to myself?
Yeah.
It's a really good theme for Lent, actually, isn't it? Let's
It really
let's put
is.
self away and
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah,
again, we're seeing. Come on, cannot help but see the connections that are going on at the moment. It's all being played out again there. I
yeah,
don't want to get too far into the politics of it all, but the bystander. When have we just been a bystander? Well, what we've seen this last week and how it's all changed.
yeah,
When we're suddenly now moving into action, through compassion.
yeah.
As we speak today, that is happening very much. There's a lot of compassion happening there.
I'm a little torn at the moment, I have to say, with the response to the Ukraine crisis, because it's everyone's natural response to want to help,
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
and but it's how we help.
exactly.
So people are. I mean, I've had a couple of queries as well. Are we doing a collection of stuff
Yeah,
for the refugees in Ukraine, or people still living in Ukraine? But everything I've looked at online, if you drill down, says please don't send stuff, and there have been pictures online of warehouses already full of stuff that won't be used, because the whole of Europe, the whole of the world wants to send stuff, and there's only so much stuff they need, even for 40 million people. What they need is money,
exactly.
and
Yes,
and
yeah,
and I've had someone say to me, but I've got a roof full of good stuff, but I have no money to send them, and I'm thinking, well, actually you could donate that stuff to perhaps a Red Cross charity shop or something like that, who would then sell it and then send the money to Ukraine. Do you know what I mean? There are kind of other ways of doing it, but it's people's instant reaction to want to give of what they have, and there's nothing wrong with that,
yeah.
but
But it's
it needs to be the right sort of stuff, doesn't it, really?
exactly, yeah, and indeed how to process that act of generosity to
Yeah,
go in the right way. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So it does tie in there with action through compassion. It's finding the right action
yeah.
to show that compassion.
I'm going to move us on and perhaps not read
Yeah.
statements, but just the question. So what should be our attitude towards tackling injustice, and in what way is it threatening to be challenged to embark on a campaign towards justice for all?
Ooh, yes.
I think I touched on it earlier, that our attitude towards tackling injustice should be one of looking after others, of compassion, rather than one of what's the cost to me.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
that's
Yeah.
what it should be. That's a
Yes.
lot easier said than done,
Yeah.
I feel.
Yeah. 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 And of course, all that is mirrored in Jesus Christ and the way He tackled the greatest injustices of all.
Yeah.
And He certainly didn't hang back, because as we all know, He went to the cross for it.
He went to the crossroad, but he didn't own anything, did he? Whatever he had, he must have given it away, if
Absolutely.
he had anything.
Mm.
And he survived with nothing, but made sure everyone had everything they needed rather than everything they wanted. And that's another trap that we fall into, isn't it? That we think we need stuff that we don't need.
Yeah.
You know.
Absolutely. Yeah. 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 And your second question, the second question on that part there, threatened to be challenged to embark. Yeah, it's when push comes to shove, I know I always hold back on it. Say, well, actually, if you feel that passionate and strong about it, would I be ready to go out and take part in a demonstration on the streets? And oh gosh,
Yeah.
that is, I've never
I
done
mean,
it, but
thankfully we don't know. I
no,
think I'd take part in demonstration. I'm not sure. I'm absolutely in awe of these Ukrainians that, with no background in any sort of physical violence at all, are putting themselves forward to fight the Russians as they come, and that's absolutely amazing. And I think they're credible. Thankfully, I've not been tested on that. You know, I'm really grateful for not being tested on that, and I'd like to think that I wouldn't be found wanting, but you just never know. And yeah.
Yes.
So it talks then
Ooh.
about the Israelites, you know, the mental shift that we were talking about earlier when they were the mental shift from being captives to
Yeah.
being free. And it says, how would they build a new society? And because of their experience, would they in turn exploit others?
Mm.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting, isn't it? Because I don't know if I should bring up this
Go
analogy
on.
really,
Yeah.
but I'm just thinking of, and you would know from your counselling as well, that where people have been in a relationship where they somehow or other have been abused, very often they fall into a similar relationship again, and I think it's possibly because that's what they know.
Yeah.
You
It
know,
is. They love it.
they've not
Yeah.
experienced the other side of
Exactly.
the coin,
Yeah.
have they?
For them, it's been the norm. Yeah.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah.
Sadly, very sadly.
Absolutely.
And I think that can happen, can't it? And it's how to
Absolutely.
break that mold. And there again, it's Jesus Christ, isn't it? Who came and turned everything on its head. You know,
Absolutely. Yeah.
completely turned everything on its head. And we think of it's very normal and very lovely the way he talked, but actually in his day he was so radical, so
Absolutely.
incredibly radical about you know his thoughts
Yeah.
about having access to the Father, you
Yeah.
know, about loving each other so much, about not judging everyone, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
Exodus challenge us to examine how we seek justice. Do we simply reproduce the patterns of thought and action of those we challenge? Or are we ready to be transformed by God's radical call to hold together justice and compassion for all? Well, we hope so, don't we?
We absolutely hope so. Yeah. Yeah. I know my inclination is to get. I fall back on that first one there. Yeah. But then another part of me says no. I should be on that second line there. Ready to be transformed
That's
and to
one
take steps to help transform.
to be radical. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
thing is, at the times, the moments that I have been more radical and
Mm.
been out there and done something to made a difference, my goodness, it feels good. You know, it feels like God's blessing times 20. You know, it's
Yeah.
just wonderful.
Absolutely.
So,
Yes.
hopefully, there's if you're watching this, there's some first thoughts there
Mm.
about justice and. It's quite a topical conversation for many things around the world, but especially because of what's happening in Ukraine. So do ponder on them, and if you're looking at this before we do our first session, which actually this is Ash Wednesday, hence our marks on our foreheads on this recording. Um, but if you are around tomorrow and want to explore these even further, it'll be the same questions but with different people, so it'll be more challenging. We'll be at Haver Park Chapel at 10:30 for an hour tomorrow morning, leading a group about these very things. So we will just finish with this prayer. Loving God, inspire us to seek justice your way, driven by compassion for all, shaped by your holiness, and ready to discover grace in the most unexpected places. Amen.
Amen.
Lovely. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Helen. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, everyone, and we'll see you soon. God bless.
Goodbye.